Delegates, it gives me great pride to welcome you here today, back here in Queensland, the spiritual home of our union. The state, along with Victoria, where our union began, and the state that still has our union's biggest membership base. From the very beginning, 127 years ago, our union's founder, William Guthrie Spence, defined the Australian Workers' Union as moderate but firm. A union that believes in practical measures to improve the lives of working people. Delegates, we're not heroes, we're not revolutionaries. We're just ordinary people who believe in the fair go. But our belief in fairness has led us to a very special place. And by getting involved in our union, the Australian Workers' Union, we have all taken on an extraordinary responsibility. We've accepted a sacred mission. It is our mission to protect the working people of Australia from exploitation. It is our mission to make sure the voice of working people is heard. It is our mission to ensure that those who try to destroy the notion of a good Aussie job, those who rip away at our working conditions, who try to make life harder, are held to account. That's why we all get up in the morning, why we put in the long hours, and why we're all here today. Delegates, I am so honoured by the confidence that you've shown in me and the national leadership team that for only the second time in the history of this great union, every single full-time official has been re-elected unopposed. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. The past 5.5 years have been the best of my life, and I can't imagine that I'll ever be paid a greater honour than to be elected as National Secretary of this amazing union. I want you to remember that what we do in the next 2 years, or in fact in our entire working lives, is different from a normal job. It's not something we do for money or personal gratification, nor can we simply measure ourselves by our intentions or pat ourselves on the back for fighting the good fight. We're here to deliver results for our members, the hard-working men and women of Australia. We're here to defend the legacy of our forebears and to pave the way for our successors. We're here for the fair go, and we're here to get the job done for our members. Delegates, our union is utterly professional in the way that it represents Australian workers. We do it with integrity, we do it with passion, and we do it with humility. Humility is one of those things that defines us as Australians. We don't like to big note ourselves. We barrack for the underdog and we always speak in understatements. When we see something truly extraordinary, we say, yeah, that's not so bad. And when we achieve something, we don't dwell on it. We just get back on with the job and look to the next challenge. But today, just briefly, we should all put down that natural humility and take a deep breath and allow ourselves a few moments of pride. Because we all should be proud of our roles as the current custodians of this organisation. Our national president always says that we're just passing through, and that's true. We are the people who at this point in time are holding the baton, and one day we'll pass it on to others, to a new generation. But we should be proud of what we have achieved during our time. Many people have written us off, and yet we haven't just survived. We have become stronger. Our enemies have been many. People have been attacking us and trying to destroy us from the day that this union was formed. They'll keep coming, and we'll keep fighting. And that's why the forces of conservatism, the vested interests, and the oligarchs are so scared of the Australian Workers' Union. They hate us because we keep fighting. They hate us because we keep winning. They hate us because they fear us. And delegates, the thing that our enemies haven't learnt about the AWU over the last 127 years is that this union's not Paul Howes, it's not Bill Ludwig, it's not our officials, it's not our building, it's not our logo, it's not even our name. Our union is a movement of working people that is almost 140,000 strong. You attack one of us and you attack us all. And a movement this strong This united and this determined is a powerful force to be reckoned with. Our greatest strength is our solidarity in the face of hardship. We are resilient. For the past 127 years, our movement has persevered, has struggled through, and has kept searching for that promised land. The land where people get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, where they can provide for their families knowing that they have secure employment, where they can balance work, rest, and recreation, and where everyone can share in the bounty that our land provides. Delegates, few things give me greater pleasure than sitting down with my counterparts from other unions and saying, I'm from the AWU. Because everyone in this country knows that the AWU is the most effective, most united trade union in Australia. And for well over 12 years now, we have gone from the pits of despair during terrible periods of internal distraction and conflict to becoming the most powerful voice for working people in this land. No one rivals us. We may encounter the odd distraction here and there. We may hear the occasional sneering negative comment from our supposed friends within the movement. But always remember what motivates those types of comments. Jealousy. Delegates, no one rivals us because we have the best leaders, the strongest, most determined leaders in the great Australian labour movement. Many of you are sitting here today. No one else has a Bill Ludwig. There's only one of him. No other union has a Ben Swan, a Richard Downey, a Russ Collison, a Wayne Phillips. No other union has a Caesar Mellom, an Ian Wakefield, a Wayne Hanson, a Stephen Price, or a Scott McDine. No other union does, and no other union ever will. Because our union has always had the leading lights, the big characters, the men and women of immense strength and foresight leading it. We are so lucky to have these people leading our union, followed up by several hundred more officials, organisers, industrial officers, administrative staff, from our national president through to the receptionists in our regional offices. We are the very best at what we do. And I want to thank each and every one of you for all the work that you have done over the past 2 years on behalf of all of our members. Despite the rantings and snide insinuations of the Conservative columnists, we are here because we believe in our nation and we believe in our cause. We believe in good Aussie jobs. What we do makes a difference. It makes a difference 24 hours a day, every day of the week, every week of the year. And we've been making a difference for 127 years. Whether it's fighting for workers who have been unfairly dismissed, fighting for better paying conditions, or fighting for safer workplaces so that you can leave home in the morning knowing that you'll come home after work safe. Whether it's fighting to save jobs when companies threaten to shut down plants, fighting on behalf of local communities who are suffering from high unemployment, or fighting to protect our rights at work, rights that have been hard-earned over generations. This is what we do. And this is what we will continue to do. We fight for people and give them the strength through collective action to stand up for themselves. There is perhaps no finer example of our commitment to the Australian community than the way that our members respond to adversity, crisis and disaster. And sadly, we've seen it again in recent months with bushfires and floods across the country. Our hearts go out to all those that are affected. Delegates, it was our members out there on the front line. Our members in the state government parks agencies, in the forestry agencies, in the rural fire brigades and the local councils. Our members in the regional towns and cities looking after their friends and families and neighbours. It was our members putting their lives on the line to help others, and very sadly, it was our members who gave their lives. This is just another illustration of how our members care for their communities. But delegates, in some circles, it's no longer fashionable to care. It's all about the individual. It's about the type of car you drive and the size of the house you live in. In our union, we're not ashamed to be the people who believe in the collective. We believe in unity. We don't worship at the altar of the individual. We believe that we all do better when we work together. And by believing in collective action, we can bring out the very best in our nation. That's why at the Australian Workers' Union, we are stronger together. Delegates, while we have much to be proud of and while we have much to look forward to, we can't ignore the dark clouds that are looming over our heads. We are facing some huge challenges. Our world is changing rapidly, and our industries are under intense pressure. In the 5 years since I was elected National Secretary, we have weathered the most severe financial crisis the world has seen since the Great Depression. We have seen the most significant downturn in Australian manufacturing since Federation. And in the past 2 years, we've seen BlueScope Steel shed jobs and move from being a major international steel producer to being a relatively small company today. We've seen severe hardship in places like Wollongong, Western Port, Whyalla and Newcastle. We've seen the first aluminium smelter in Australian history to shut down. But despite all of this, our members know, and the wider Australian community should know, that if it wasn't for the tough and drastic action that our union took when the crisis in manufacturing first hit, we wouldn't be talking about one aluminium smelter shutting down. We wouldn't be talking about closing one blast furnace. We would be talking about 1 million working Australians in the manufacturing industry being out of work, and that is the reality. Delegates, wasn't it great to see that Australian legend Jack Thompson up on the big screen a few minutes ago? As Jack Thompson said, we are a union that makes things. We make the steel roofing that keeps the rain off our heads. We make the paper that your children ride on. We build ships and cars and the parts that go into them. We build train tracks and the trains that run on them. We drill for oil and we refine our fuel. We're the engineers who keep our planes in the air. We look after the sick and provide services for the poor. We clean our towns and patrol our beaches. We make the food that we eat. We supply the water we drink. We were the people who were shearing sheep back when our country rode on the sheep's back, and we still do it today. We changed the country when we built the Snowy Mountain Scheme and the Harbour Bridge, and today we mine the country's resources that are driving our national prosperity. We even ride the horses in the race that stops the nation. And when you go for a beer tonight, you'll be drinking out of glasses made by AWU members. Delegates, Delegates, what an incredible union we are. We are the union that makes Australia. But somewhere along the way, Australia started to lose pride in what it built. Maybe we took our place in the world for granted. Maybe the world started changing and we forgot to change with it. Now we're making less. We've always mined our resources, but today we just ship it off as bulk commodities so that other countries can make things with our minerals. Delegates, the country that we built, that the AWU built, is more than just a quarry for China. But if we're going to get our mojo back, then we need to take a stand. 80 years ago, the great Queenslander and AWU leader, Ted Theodore, argued for decisive action to lead Australia out of the Great Depression. Theodore knew that you can't leave a country's economy to chance. He knew that failing to plan was planning to fail. We can't allow our economy to become a one-trick pony, reliant on one sector at the mercy of global commodity prices. We need to rebuild our capacity in sectors like manufacturing and agriculture, because we are a country that makes things. We might be making different things in 2013 than we were making in 1933, but we're still here. And our Australian way of life, our bedrock industries, will be as important to our future as they have been to our past. Delegates, change is always hard. It's like a train. If you don't hop on board, it runs you over. And that's why we've had to confront really difficult questions over the past 2 years. Dealing with climate change is not an easy issue for our union. But we didn't sell our members a pup. We didn't lie or pretend that carbon pricing was something that we could stop. We didn't sell out our principles or sell out our members' job security. And we walked out at the end knowing that we had struck the best possible deal for our members. And the point is this: change is tough, but you can't hide from it. Our union has survived 127 years because we deal with change constructively. We adapt, but we never give up on our mission, and we never give up on our principles. The one thing about our movement, whether it's the political wing or the industrial wing, is that when we're in it, we're not in it for ourselves. We're in it for everyone. And we're passionate about what we do. And sometimes it ain't very pretty when you look at the internal workings of it all. Like the old saying goes, laws are like sausages. It's probably best not to see them being made. Sure, there have been some problems, there have been divisions, but that's pretty natural in our type of movement because we're so passionate and we believe so firmly in what we're seeking to achieve. But we should never lose track of the light on the hill that Ben Chifley spoke of. And we should never lose track of what we are trying to do. And we should never forget what our political opponents are trying to do to this country. It's not hard to see what Tony Abbott would be like as leader of the country, because we can see what he's like as leader of the opposition. He's like a vision, his negativity, his relentless use of smear tactics and his constant exaggerations. Tony Abbott and the Liberals have tried to bog down the parliament and bog down the government with low-rent politics. They've tried to create a situation where governing is impossible, where the country suffers, where the people suffer, and the people are forced to change the government to break the deadlock. As Paul Keating said, Tony Abbott's approach is, if you don't give me the job, I'll wreck the place. Delegates, is there anything more irresponsible than that? It's a tried and true Liberal Party tactic. Malcolm Fraser used it to oust Gough Whitlam in 1975. But this time, the people of Australia are awake to what is happening. And this time, we have a Prime Minister called Julia Gillard. A Prime Minister who's street tough. A Prime Minister who's determined. A Prime Minister who's overseen one of the most productive periods of government in the history of our federation. Delegates, I'm proud of what we have achieved with the federal Labor government. The Steel Transformation Plan, which has secured a future for our iconic steel industry. The support plans for aluminium smelters and for car manufacturers, which have saved tens of thousands of jobs. The creation of an anti-dumping commission after a 2-year campaign by this union. The Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force, which brought together industry and unions to work through the problems and to find solutions. And now the federal government's billion-dollar rescue plan to transform our manufacturing industry. Delegates, yesterday's announcement by the Prime Minister was a landmark day for Australian jobs and a landmark day for our union. That's why I'm proud to be a supporter of Julia Gillard. We support her because we want someone who's leading this nation who's prepared to make the tough calls, the hard decisions, and to cop the flack. Someone who's prepared to stand up to the shock jocks and the billionaires and the media barons. Someone who'll fight and scrape to do the right thing for this nation. Not for themselves, not for their party, but for the nation. That's what our union's always done. We're not the most popular kids in school, but we're not the kids who get picked on either. Like the Prime Minister, we stand up for what we believe in and we don't back down. And I'm proud to lead a union that backs her 110%. And delegates, I'm proud that our Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, will be here tonight. The Prime Minister and her Cabinet colleagues will be here because they too care about working people. And they too want to make this country a better place for all Australians. Delegates, Julia Gillard governs for all Australians, but a Tony Abbott-led government would be a different story. We can sit here and talk about what might happen if Tony Abbott and the coalition win the next federal election. But if we really want to see what life is like under a coalition government then all we have to do is look out that door and look at what the LNP has done to the great state of Queensland over the past 12 months. Queensland, a state ravaged by drought, then by flood, then by cyclones, and then ravaged by Campbell Newman. Poor old Queensland just can't cop a trick. 17,000 jobs gone. Not the 17,000 jobs of paper-pushing bureaucrats. We're talking about 17,000 of the most important people in our community. The people who work in our hospitals and keep our streets safe. The people who educate and care for our children. We pay taxes so the government can employ these people to provide us with basic and essential services. These are our people. They are a part of the union that makes things. They make communities. They make life better for all Australians. And what do the Conservatives do? They crush them. Abolish their jobs at the altar of a credit rating determined by some fat cat banker sitting in an office in Wall Street. That is Campbell Newman's constituency. Not the Queenslanders who voted for him, not our members, not the people who lost their homes, their friends and their loved ones in the floods. No delegates. Campbell Newman governs for the rating agencies, for the number crunchers. He governs for Wall Street. And Campbell Newman is the new pin-up boy of Conservative government in Australia. But delegates, the Conservative premiers are all cut from the same cloth. In New South Wales, Barry O'Farrell is quietly cutting a swathe through the public service, attacking basic conditions like workers' compensation. In Victoria, Ted Baillieu wakes up every now and then to attack the jobs of teachers, of nurses, of our members in the Department of Sustainability and the Environment. And then he goes back to sleep. Well, I'm glad he's well rested. But the problem is our members in construction need to know what's happening next when the major projects they're working on, which were all started by the previous Labor government, are finished. Over in the west, the cost of living is going up and up. Regional towns are overcrowded and expensive, and essential services are stretching to the breaking point. The mining boom is making a few people rich, but working people are getting squeezed. Delegates, if Tony Abbott and the Coalition win the next federal election, this is the model we will see right across the nation. The experience of failed coalition state governments will be replicated on a national scale. The Liberals do not believe in a fair day's pay for fair day's work. They do not believe in good Aussie jobs. They do not believe in looking after the battler. That's why we have to prepare ourselves for the fight of our lives. Delegates, cast yourselves back to the last time we gathered here at the National Conference. 2 years ago, we launched a campaign to get a collective agreement for workers at the Rio Tinto smelter in Bell Bay, Tasmania. I may have even said a few provocative things. I may have even been a bit colourful in my language. But we here at the AWU call a spade a spade. And delegates, what happened? We got derided for telling a few home truths about the mining bosses. We got told to play nicer. We got told that we couldn't criticise the head of Rio Tinto, Tom Albanese, that we couldn't express an opinion. Well, delegates, a few weeks ago, Tom Albanese announced that he managed to misplace $14 billion. That's a lot of money to lose. That's a lot of money to misplace. That's not leaving a 20 at a bar. And yet, we're the bad guys for daring to criticise people like that. Delegates, it's people like Tom Albanese, Gina Rinehart or Clive Palmer, these titans of industry who can't even make a profit during the middle of a resources boom. It's these people who have the gall to try and buy an election with a $30 million advertising campaign just because they don't want to pay their fair share of tax. It's these strategic geniuses from Rio Tinto who can blow $3.2 billion on one failed mining project in Mozambique, who have the audacity to fly over here from London and threaten our democracy, who have the audacity to tell us how much they'll pay for the resources that we own. those resources aren't being mined in the West End of London. They're being mined in Paraburdoo, Western Australia, in Cobar, New South Wales, in Roxby Downs, South Australia, in Rosebery, Tasmania, in Mount Isa, Queensland. They're Australian resources being mined by Australian workers. But these corporate robber barons in their shiny ass suits think that they own our country. They think that they can do what they like with our minerals without even paying a fair share. But delegates, what these kings in sandcastles forget is that if you want to take on the Australian people, if you intend on doing the wrong thing by our nation, if you think you can come to this continent and sell the people that work and live here down the river, you won't be unopposed. You'd better know how to fight hard and how to fight long, because you'll be taking on the mighty Australian Workers' Union, nearly 140,000 strong. You'll have to reckon with us. Delegates, 2 years ago we said that we would take on Rio Tinto, and we did. 2 years ago we said we'd take on Rio Tinto, and delegates, we won. I'm proud to say here today, that when you go to Launceston and drive up the Tamar and see that big industrial site by the river, you'll be looking at a reunionised AWU aluminium smelter. For the first time in 20 years, those workers are going to have an AWU collective agreement. For the first time in 20 years, those workers are going to get a fair go at work with AWU protection. And indeed, for the first time ever in the history of this union, in the history of this nation, we have reunionised a factory that was aggressively deunionised by a ruthless multinational almost a generation ago. Delegates, they told us we couldn't do it, but we did. And here's the sweet irony. The week that we won our great victory at Bell Bay, that historic moment when workers returned to the union family and forced Rio Tinto to respect their rights at work and forced Rio Tinto to bargain with them collectively, was the same week that the emperor of Rio Tinto, Tom Albanese, was shown the door. He was sent packing from the Rio Empire in absolute disgrace. That's right, delegates. As Tom Albanese slid out the back door, the AWU walked back in the front. Well, Tommy, how do you like them apples? Delegates, a few moments ago I told you to take pride in your achievements. And beating Rio Tinto is something definitely to be proud of. But don't get too carried away. Because right now it's time for us to get back to work. Those of you here as rank and file members, as workplace delegates, as organisers, industrial officers, as assistant secretaries, branch secretaries, national officials. What you do here over the next few days will shape what our union does for the next 2 years. Our national conference is always an extremely important occasion for our union. It's where our major decisions are made. It's where our most pressing issues are debated. It's where the direction for the following 2 years is set. It's where the democratic processes of this great union are put to the test and are put on display for all to see. This week's agenda will cover the big issues and discuss important resolutions. First and foremost, we'll discuss policies to make sure that Australia continues to be a country that makes things. We'll discuss the need for government to co-invest in manufacturing. We'll discuss local content policy, the need for government to pick winners, the need for a national gas reservation policy to secure our energy future, and how to raise productivity without undermining the living standards of working Australians. Delegates, our union can be proud of the way that it governs itself. We had our problems in the distant past, and we learnt some difficult lessons. But we have moved on and built a stronger organisation, an organisation made of workers for workers. This week we'll reiterate our fundamental commitment to the most stringent internal governance practices and our zero-tolerance approach to misconduct. Delegates, our task is to represent our members. It's to lead our communities. It's to build a better country. It's to fight for what's right. We're a union that makes things. We're a union that carries the torch for working Australians, their families, and their communities. We're the guardians of a 127-year-old legacy. We're the soldiers who will fight for a nation based on equity and fairness. Delegates, when William Guthrie Spence and David Temple called a meeting in a pub on a cold June night in Ballarat in 1886, they knew what they were doing. Spence always knew what type of organisation he was creating. It wasn't just to resolve a dispute with pastoralists in the shearing sheds of regional Victoria. It wasn't just to grow an organisation to make sure that shearers got a fair go at work. It was to create a movement to change the very nature of colonial Australia, to ensure that the fledgling nation which was about to be created became the home of fairness, of equality, the home of good Aussie jobs. And that's what we're still doing today. That is what we are still creating. It's pretty amazing when you step back and you realise that this organisation, which has continued uninterrupted for 127 years, started in a pub over a few beers. It might be a bit fitting as well. The other week I came across a quote that Spence wrote 102 years ago. Please forgive the gender-specific language, but that's how they talked back then. But it sums up what I think about the men and women who make up today's AWU. Spence wrote that, "The man who joins the union becomes a better man. He becomes more social, takes a wider interest in human affairs, and consequently becomes more unselfish. His membership makes him a better husband, a better father, and a more active citizen. It is because of this fact that the AWU has exercised such a powerful influence on Australian affairs, extending over the whole continent, Australian in character, united in aim and thought. It has done so much for the solidarity of Labor and the realisation of Labor's high ideals." Delegates, that was written by Spence in 1911. But it is as true today as it was then. This is who we are. This is what we are. And this is what we always will be. Now let's get to work, let's live up to that legacy, and let's get on with the job of representing the hard-working men and women of the great Australian Workers' Union. Thank you very much.